Welcome to Chapter 2, Session 11 of Old Testament History. We are still in the patriarchal administration. One of the features of that era was that God dealt with the heads of the households. That was the domestic priesthood. They set up altars. They offered sacrifices. They spoke prophecy to their families, just like priests do. They decided who and how their families worshiped. We've read multiple examples of those things. Noah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were models of this mode of worship. God spake to them, and angels interacted with them. We now have reached the point in the Old Testament that the promise to Abraham is taking shape. To found a nation, one must be prolific. Abraham's seed certainly was virile. The Arabs and the Jews come from Ishmael and Isaac, and then other nations like the Midianites, the Assyrians, the people of Sheba come through Abraham's other wife, Keturah. Abraham lived long enough to see the birth of his twin grandsons, Jacob and Esau. And Jacob certainly was prolific. He was the father of the tribes of Israel. We now pick up the account after he returned from Laban and made peace with Esau and settled back in Canaan. Please go to Genesis 34. Genesis 34, verse 1. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Havite, prince of the country, saw her, and he took her and lay with her and defiled her. And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel, and spake kindly unto the damsel. And Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, Get me this damsel to wife. Wow, that was contrary to custom. It was backwards. But at least he wanted to marry her. It was a bad situation. Being in a rich household, as she was, Dinah should have been married to a man of her father Jacob's choosing, under much better circumstances. Verse 5, And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah his daughter. Now his sons were with the cattle in the field, and Jacob held his peace until they were come. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it. And the men were grieved. They were very angry, because he had wrought folly in Israel, in lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. And Hamor communed with them, saying, The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. I pray you give her him to wife. And make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you. So he was proposing one of those family alliances. Verse 10, And you shall dwell with us in the land, shall be before you. Dwell and trade ye therein, and get you possessions therein. And Shechem said unto her father and unto her brethren, Let me find grace in your eyes, and what you shall say unto me I will give. Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as you shall say unto me, but give me the damsel to wife. You see, because of the bad circumstances, he basically said, Name your price, and I will pay it. Verse 13, And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father deceitfully, and said, Because he hath defiled Dinah their sister. And they said unto them, We cannot do this thing, to give our daughter to one that's uncircumcised. for that is a reproach unto us. But in this will we consent to you, if you will be as we, that every male of you be circumcised. Then will we give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if you will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter, and we will be gone. Verse 18, and their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. And the young men deferred not to do the thing, because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the house of his father. And Hamor and Shechem his son came unto the gate of their city, and communed with the men of their city, saying, These men are peaceable with us, therefore let them dwell in the land, and trade therein. For the land, behold, it is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us for wives, let us give them our daughters. Only herein will the men consent unto us, for to dwell with us, to be one people, if every male among us be circumcised, as they are circumcised. Now look at verse 23. Shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent unto them, and they will dwell with us. So, this might have seemed to be a good proposition, to be able to dwell peaceably with their neighbors, except they worshipped other gods, and also they had designs on absorbing the sons of Jacob and their wealth. That wouldn't be so good for the family business, would it? But what Simeon and Levi did was even worse, because they had answered deceitfully. They had ulterior motive. Verse 24. And unto Hamor, unto Shechem his son, hearkened unto all that went out of the gate of his city, and every male was circumcised, and all that went out of the gate of his city. And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword, and came upon the city boldly, and killed all the males. They slew Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword. They took Dinah out of Shechem's house, and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain, and spoiled the city, because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep, their oxen, their asses, all that was in the city, that which was in the field too, and all their wealth, and all their little ones, and their wives took they captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, You've troubled me, to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and I being few in number, and they shall gather themselves together against me, and slay me, and I shall be destroyed in my house. And they said, Should we deal with our sister as with a harlot? Well, two wrongs don't make a right, do they? No. I know Jacob's sons were angry because their sister had been violated. But the young man who did it wanted to do the right thing and marry her. And his father was willing to pay a high price because of the infraction. It also says the young man was more honorable. So is it possible that you could see a different solution than what the sons of Jacob did? If she didn't get married, the daughter was going to be, quote-unquote, damaged goods for the rest of her life, because she couldn't be married off as a virgin as usual. So I'd say take the high price, let the young man marry her, but don't intermarry the rest of your family. Let the young man get circumcised, but not the rest. Because when his sons deceitfully answered, and then killed all the men, and enslaved the women and children, and sacked their city, what do you think that did for proselytizing, converting unbelievers to the faith? Well, it surely discouraged it, because people would say, well, how do I know you won't kill me when I'm recovering from circumcision? Plus, it endangered the entire family. They had to move. Genesis 35:1. And God said to Jacob, Rise, go to Bethel, and dwell there. Make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. And Jacob said to his household, and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments, because we're going to go worship, so clean yourselves up. Let us arise and go to Bethel, And I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. So Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel, he and all the people that were with him, and built an altar, and called the place Ebethel, because God appeared unto him when he fled from the face of his brother. But Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak, and the name of it was called Elon Bakuth. And God appeared unto Jacob again when he came out of Padan Aram, and blessed him. And God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob, thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. So this confirms what the angel had said earlier. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee will I give it, to thy seed after thee will I give the land. So again, the covenant was repeated, reannounced. Verse 13, and God went up from him in the place where he talked with him, and Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even a pillar of stone. And he poured a drink offering thereon, and he poured oil thereon. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spake with him, Bethel. And he journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath. And Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said unto her, Fear not, thou shalt have this son also. And it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Benomi, but his father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died, and was buried in the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob set up a pillar upon her grave, that is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. And Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the tower of Eder. So, if I'm reading chapter 35 right, because they had to leave town, because of the rash action of the sons, 2 important women died during the trip. One of them, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died of old age, and one, Rachel, died in childbirth. Well, what if they hadn't needed to make that trip? Wow. The next session is genealogies. We're going to skip over that. And after that, the Genesis turns to the amazing story of Joseph. So let's go to Genesis chapter 37. Genesis 37. Verse 1. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. And these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably unto them. Now, to understand this, we need to remember that Jacob originally had worked for Laban 7 years so he could marry Rachel, Joseph's mother. She was his first love and his favorite. But remember, Laban had tricked him into working 7 more years by pulling the old switcheroo with Leah on Jacob's wedding night. So even though Jacob's firstborn was Reuben, Leah's son, Jacob counted Rachel's firstborn son, Joseph, as his heir. So Joseph would get the birthright, the double portion of the inheritance, the domestic priesthood, and the guardianship of the clan. And Jacob started grooming him for this position at an early age and signified it by giving Joseph a long-sleeved tunic that went down to his ankles. It was not a coat of many colors, as King James says. Rotherham translates it a long tunic, because those who did hard labor could not wear something like this, for it would get in the way. But managers, rulers, and priests could wear something like that. Now, they still did work, but it wasn't so strenuous as to get in the way. In Revelation 1:13, Jesus had the same kind of robe that went down to the foot, it says. So, it was an indication of one's stature. He was their manager. Back in verse 2, it said that he brought back an evil report from the field. So part of his job was to keep Jacob informed. See, he was the manager. Verse 5, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, there were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and stood also upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. So they bowed down to his sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I've dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him and said to him, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him. But his father observed the saying, because he discerned it was revelation. What does the fact that Joseph was having prophetic dreams tell you? He had the Spirit upon him. Remember, the Holy Spirit was not automatically given to every believer in the Old Testament. Only selected ones that God decided should have it. Genesis 37, verse 12. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, Do not thy brothers feed the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. And he said to them, Here I am. And he said, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man said to him, What are you looking for? And he said, I'm seeking my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. See, his brother didn't respect his management, because they didn't even tell him that they'd moved. The man said, They departed hence. I heard him say, Let's go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren. So they didn't go back and tell anybody back at home. They decided to go to a different place. They just went. So he went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near to them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer comes. Now, come now, therefore, and let's slay him. Cast him into some pit, and we'll say some evil beast has devoured him. And then we're going to see what becomes of his dreams. And Reuben heard it. Reuben's the eldest. And he delivered him out of their hands and said, let's not kill him. He was the eldest, he had some clout. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but throw him in this pit that's in the wilderness. Lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him back to his father again. So Reuben didn't want to kill him. He wanted to save him and take him back home. Came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. They took him and cast him into the pit. And the pit was empty, had no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread. And they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites, Arabs, came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he's our brother and our flesh. Yeah, right. And his brethren were content. Then there passed by the Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, for cheap. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now, apparently, Reuben was not part of this plan to sell him as a slave. Reuben wanted to get him out of the pit and get him back home. Because in verse 29, Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his clothes, and he returned to his brothers and said, the child is not. And what am I going to do? And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. They sent the coat of many colors. They brought it to their father and said, this we found. We don't know whether it be your son's coat or not. Yeah, right. And he knew it and said, it's my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is, without doubt, torn in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, and the captain of the guard. Now, the storyline switches in Genesis. We're going to get back to Joseph later. Genesis 38:1. And it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned into a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. And he took her and went in unto her. And Judah said, I don't know how she got that name. Maybe, Judah said, can I have a drink of water? And she said, Shua. and Judah said, aha, you must be from Boston. And she said, Shua. What's your name, honey? Shua. No, I already know you're from Boston. I asked you, what's your name? Shua. You're kind of sassy. I like you. Shua. Do you want to get married? And she said, Shua. That must be how she got her name. But verse 3. And she conceived and bare a son, and he called his name Well, actually, he didn't want what happened to her when she was born, because, they'd asked her mom if her mom wanted to name the baby, and she said, Shua. So that's how Shua got her name. But when Shua gave birth and they asked him, what do you want to name him? He was hesitant and wanted to be careful, so he said, I don't know. And they said, okay, is his name. No. Young's Concordance says that means watcher. Sorry about that. But Genesis 38:4. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan, which means strength. And she yet conceived and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Chezib when she bare him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord slew him. That's that idiom of permitted that to happen. And Judah said to Onan, Go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother. Now, this is a practice that we don't follow in our culture, but this is called levirate marriage. Levirate, levirate marriage. I'm going to read to you a little bit of an article by Devorah Weisberg I found on the internet. Levirate marriage is one of the responses to the challenges that rose when an Israelite man died, leaving a widow but no children. What becomes of a widow with no children to care for her? What becomes of a man's name and property in the absence of direct heirs? Levirate marriage, as described in Deuteronomy 25, verse 5 through 10, offers a solution to both questions. Let the dead man's brother marry the widow, and let the children, or at least the first child of this union, be accounted to the deceased brother. In Ruth, the book of Ruth, Naomi references levirate marriage as she urges her daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, to return to their families of origin. She said, Do I still have sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? And even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they're grown? So Naomi urges that even if she could bear sons who could enter into levirate unions, it would be unreasonable to ask Ruth and Orpah to wait until these sons were old enough to marry. Because Naomi's sons are dead and she has no hope of bearing others, her daughters-in-law were free of any obligation. Scholars disagree as to whether the events described in Ruth relate to the institution of levirate marriage, though according to Boaz, the marriage will maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance, as it says in Ruth 4:10. The marriage of Ruth and Boaz does not seem mandated by the law in Deuteronomy, given that Boaz is not Ruth's brother-in-law, nor does the genealogy in Ruth 4 credit Ruth's son to her deceased husband line. In some ways, the transaction described resembles the redemption process for property outlined in Leviticus 25, and that's what it does do. So this levirate marriage was a strategy for preserving a man's legacy and property by producing a posthumous heir for him, but also it was to take care of the widow, because without that, she'd be destitute and tempted to become a harlot. We wouldn't want that. So what happened with the son, he died, and so he was supposed to have his brother, Onan, marry his wife and raise up seed to your brother. So to have an heir. Genesis 38:9. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his, wouldn't be accounted to him. And it came to pass, when he went in unto his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. Now, the Bible says the thing which he did displeased the Lord. So, because of that, the withdrawal method of contraception, etc., is banned by some church denominations. Well, is that what really displeased God? Well, when we look at this through spiritual eyes, in light of the themes of the Old Testament, what really is the case becomes clear. You know, the promise was given to Abraham and his seed. The Messiah would come through them. So they had a target painted on their back spiritually, right? Angels were ascending and descending upon Canaan because that was the promised land. They were busy protecting it from attack and ministering blessings to Jacob and his family. But it says was, quote unquote, wicked in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord permitted him to be slain. That's that Hebrew idiom of permission, because they didn't give any glory to the adversary. Later on in the law, it was forbidden to even say the names of other gods. So you couldn't even say, the devil made me do it. So things were couched with the idiom of permission. So was permitted to be killed. Why? Because it says he was wicked. So he must have run out of chances, because God makes his sun to shine on the just and on the unjust. And so he must have been really wicked. And the adversary finally got him. Because, the whole family had a target on their back. Their faces were ever in every spiritual post office. They were the devil's public enemy number one. But was wicked. So he had no protection. And that's why that happened. So then his brother was supposed to marry his sister-in-law, so she wouldn't become destitute and possibly a harlot. And also, with levirate marriage, the woman didn't have to be the sole wife of the brother. He could have a second wife that he preferred. But the point was that she would be part of the family, protected by the family, and have an opportunity to bear a son to prolong the Christ line in this case. And that was the real reason that Onan died too, because Onan didn't value that. See, that's why. It wasn't because he spilled it on the ground. Genesis 38:11. Here's another situation that arose out of this. Then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah, my son, be grown. For he said, lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. And the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up unto his sheep bearers to Timnah and his friend Hira, the Adullamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, behold, thy father-in-law goes up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she put off her widow's garments from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is by the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. And when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned in on her by the way, and said, go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee, for he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what will you give me, that thou mayest come in unto me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, will you give me a pledge till thou send it? And he said, what pledge shall I give you? She said, your signet and your bracelets and your staff that's in your hand. Woo! And he gave it her, and came in on her, and she conceived by him. And she arose and went away, laid her veil from her, put on the garments from her widowhood. Oh, wow. And Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend the Adullamite to receive his pledge, to get his signet and bracelet and staff back from the woman, but he found her not. And then he asked the men of that place, saying, where is the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said, there's no harlot in this place. And he returned to Judah and said, I can't find her. And also the men of the place said, there's no harlot here. And Judah said, well, let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and you haven't found her. Well, it came to pass about 3 months later that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she's with child by whoredom. And Judah said, bring her forth, let her be burnt. And when she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are, I'm with child. She said, discern, I pray thee, whose are these? The signet, the bracelets, and the staff. Wow! And Judah acknowledged and said, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah my son, and he knew her again no more. And it came to pass in the time of her travail, that behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed, that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound his hand with a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. You just happen to have a scarlet thread there just in case. Wow. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. Boy, that was some childbirth. And she said, how has this thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez, which means break forth. And afterward came out his brother that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was Zerah. Well, it turns out Pharez was in the Christ line. Wow. And now the account returns to Joseph. So you see that from a spiritual standpoint, what all of that meant. We're going to learn a vital lesson from Joseph now about something called equanimity. This is something our society desperately needs. Equanimity is how to maintain your composure and evenness of temper when bad things happen. In our society, vengeance is glorified in rap songs and movies. We're desensitized to violence by video games and TV shows. Our schools have no bullying initiatives, but neglect helping the victims. We now demonize those who disagree with us, and so some find it easy to justify the terrible, violent retaliations that are becoming more and more commonplace today. Well, I always thought that if something ain't working, you stop doing it and you go back to see what you can do to correct the problem. Once upon a time, we had strong families and a God-fearing society for many, many years. Then a bunch of so-called enlightened people said, we need to do things different. Well, folks, how's that working out for you? Maybe we ought to get back to believing and obeying God in our country again. I found an excellent article named 4 Simple Ways to Replace Hostility with Equanimity. And it is great, very practical. So I'm going to give that PDF to you on Way Beyond. We need to teach this stuff to our kids and grandkids. And Joseph is the example. Genesis 39:1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had put into his hand. Well, how would you feel if you'd been deposed from your position as a state manager by your own brothers and sold into slavery? Would you be sullen and uncooperative as a slave? Would you be bitter and unforgiving? Well, Joseph wasn't. He was not overcome by evil. He made the best of the situation. He became the best slave he could be. Verse 5. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand. And he knew not aught he had. He didn't even know how much he had, except for the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. The Hebrew is, he was handsome in form and handsome in countenance. So he had a handsome face, and he was built, he was muscular, beautiful. And it came to pass after those things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. And he refused, and said to his master's wife, Behold, my master does not know what's with me in the house, and he has committed all that he hath to my hand. There's none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me. Thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not to her, to lie by her, to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went in the house to do his business, and there was none of the men in the house that there within. And she caught him by his garment and said, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake to them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. Yeah, right. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. She spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast bought unto us came in to mock me. It came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. It came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake to him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. That's the worst prison. And he was there in the prison. So, how would you feel after this second raw deal? Would you be sullen? Would you be bitter? Would you play the victim card? Would you just drop out and curl up and lick your wounds and woe is me? Well, Joseph didn't. Genesis 39, verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Well, that wouldn't have happened if Joseph was bitter and angry and uncooperative. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. Boy, Jacob must have taught him really good management techniques. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with Joseph, and that which he did, and the Lord made it to prosper, even in the prison. Joseph had been trained well in management by Jacob. Plus, he maintained his personal integrity. He knew he did not deserve what had happened, but he didn't let it dictate who he was. One lesson to be learned here is we shouldn't let evil dictate our responses. We should decide how we are going to respond. Sure, when evil things we don't deserve occur to us, we may be indignant, we may be angry. Well, just be careful what you do next. Don't do something you'll regret. Don't perpetuate the evil. Use that energy of that indignation and redirect it into something good. That is what good coaches teach after the team experiences defeat. They say, do you like how defeat feels? Do you want to feel it again? Well then, remember this. Take this energy and channel it into greater dedication to practice. Channel it into reaching down deeper, dedicating yourself firmer, and fighting harder to win. But before the next game, one must take a break. So let's take a break. All right? Bless you.